Hey, everybody. Welcome to another exciting episode of Cybersecurity for Sellers. So, this is a series where we talk about sort of helping non technical people, so people like sales, marketing, or newbies in the security space, to help them be able to have a better understanding of the broader picture of cybersecurity so you can sell better, deliver more, make your clients happier, get bigger contracts, all that good stuff. And so, today, we're going to talk about something near and dear to my heart, something that through all my years of sales enablement has always been a pretty important thing that I harp on, and that is selling programs and not projects, right? While this is for salespeople primarily, we talk about sort of simplifying some of the complex things so that they can understand it and have more valuable conversations with their clients. This is also something I think is good for those who are in the product services development area, understanding how your thing, whatever that is, impacts all the other stuff around it, and the sort of mindset of the security leadership that you're working with, the things that they're looking about and thinking about. So it's about more than just sort of making your contract bigger, but also providing more value to your clients as well, being able to help them along the way, because that's ideally always the key, right? So with that said, let's get started with it. So we're going to hit the share button here. Boom. And all right. So programs, not projects. First off, think about this as a sort of condensed project planning, theorizing, sort of program planning sort of mindset for security leadership, right? When I think about a purchase or what I'm going to need to develop from a security standpoint, this is kind of what the stages look like. You've got your strategy, what have we decided on doing and how does that feed into things? There's always a governance and compliance aspect of things. What do we have to be compliant with? How are we going to govern and manage this? Again, going back to the risk, the R and risk, from a risk standpoint, what have we decided to do? How is this thing that we're doing here and talking about today going to affect my risk? Then, the stuff that probably you're typically more familiar with, especially if you're used to just kind of selling kit and boxes, like there's a planning phase. How are we going to deliver this? What's it going to look like? How do we design it? How do we implement tests? And then managing, evolving, continuing to take that stuff and make it sticky and last for a long time afterwards. That's the general scope of things. So if you're just selling a product, this is kind of like when I talk to services orgs, I'm like, hey, your product vendors, this is what they care about, right? They want to make sure that they get the right bill of materials set up, that it's going to be right sized, that they have a good technical design, that it's going to be configured, deployed, and put in place, and it's going to work properly. Like, that's the things that they typically care about. So let's take that idea of selling this one thing where we're concerned around the tech design and the actual implementation of, like, just that solo point, and think about, well, as a security leader, what am I actually looking at, right? So this is kind of everything that goes through the mind of those people that you're selling to. On a roadmap perspective, how does this tooling drive my roadmap? The risk appetite that we have, the strategy that we have, does this move the needle? So some of this is going to be some pre-buy indicators as well, but also, okay, how long am I going to have this? Is it going to deprecate? Is this technology going to change? Is this service going to be long? How long is it going to last for me? Thinking about things in terms of more than just this initial transaction. What are the requirements? So the GRC requirements, again, there's generally going to be some type of compliance and governance that has to be applied to it. Some of this will feed into how it's actually configured, as well as into the other stuff down here, as how are we going to service this? How are we going to, build this into the rest of the business processes? How is this going to integrate into our security operations? All of these sort of thoughts go into place, which all of this will also feed into things like policy development. So when we talk about taking something that is a piece of a larger puzzle and then building a program around that, these are some of the other things that we think about, like how are we going to staff this? A lot of organizations, this isn't just to plug the box in and thing and walk away. At least it should never be in most cases, right? How are you going to deal with getting it the change adopted, right? User adoption is critical in keeping technology in place and keeping services in place. If what you're doing is impacting the end users in a negative way, then the end users are going to rise up and make it harder for the security leadership to keep that going and create contention. You always want to create. You don't want to create contention. You want to create harmony, right? You want everybody to be doing things in a harmonious way. So that's how we hit on those points there. Let me see. This again, so this kind of gives you some context if you're thinking about what you do and maybe the first and second degree away from it, like what things are influencing the decision, what other things do they have to be doing beyond just kind of getting the service or the technology up and running, and sort of how does that continue to run too, right? So just thinking about that, and a lot of times asking these questions, you may not have all the answers to it. You should have some awareness of what it's gonna take. And then for the things you don't do, you want to make sure you have partners and channels that can do that. This is really super valuable in taking a look at your services, your products, and then figuring out how they fit into everything else. And we'll kind of hit on that at the end to basically drive more sales as well. So I like to use data protection as an example here because one, it is fairly complicated. So there's a lot to think about, but also it kind of highlights very well so the different things. So if we look at something from a data protection standpoint, we go back to that first slide. We've got the product sale here. There's technical requirements, there's the design, there's the data protection, deploying the tooling itself and getting it tuned, and maybe even some services that, to kind of manage that long time. As a salesperson, you can deliver this 100 times over, walk away, and be quote unquote successful, right? But if we take a look a little bit more into what goes into this, so again, from the security side of things, from the security, your client side of things, right? The leadership side, the execution side, thinking about again those compliance requirements that are going to fit into here. Are we going to be able to configure these properly? What data privacy regulations do we have to deal with? What's our company framework? Are we part of a multinational that has other things, or a state government where there's sort of mandated ways of doing things? All of this is going to feed into these technical requirements quite a bit, and then you've got specific things like data flow diagrams. Where's my data going? How does it where does it go? Who has access to it? How are we classifying this? What groups are we putting things into? How are we going to label it? And if you don't understand sort of this terminology, don't get hung up on it. This is just kind of this is specific to talking about data. The key here is to realize that there's all of these things that have to be thought about and a lot of times completed or have some type of strategy or execution in place before you can even get to the point of this product sale, right? That doesn't mean you can't go sell this product to somebody who doesn't have this stuff, because absolutely seen it happen hundreds of thousands, well, not thousands, but we've seen it happen lots of times, right? But by being able to raise this information up to your client and be aware that this stuff is important and matters to make this work better is very, very critical, and it's going to show and add a lot of value. So then we get kind of into the meat of it, and from a technology standpoint, a lot of organizations, if you're selling technology, probably have some idea of what this looks like, and you may have some degree of like delivering some of these services or partnerships that you do. Very common to see, a product company partner with a lot of services companies and vice versa. But point being, as you're engaging in that conversation in the sale, the talking to those security leaders about, well, how are you going to staff this? How are you going to get the team trained? Is there going to be hiring involved? Are you going to look at a service? What does that process look like to build this entire program? So as you see, we're going to build out a bunch of stuff here, and this is going to create the overall data protection program, right? In this case, there's a governance committee that's got to make decisions about how we do things. There's going to be processes we have to integrate into beyond just feeding this into, say, the SOC, which we'll talk about a little bit, but something like data protection is going to affect all the data in the business. So, and once this is in place, anything new coming is going to have to be thought about. So you're going to have to go back and look at this stuff here for your new systems acquisition. Okay, what kind of data do they have access to, and where does it flow to? So you're going to create a lot of other integrations that wouldn't have existed before you kind of thought about building this kind of program out. How are you going to train the end users? Data protection is one of those key areas where it does impact the end users. Not all the security stuff that you sell is going to necessarily impact them, but I think it's important to understand that if you negatively impact the users, like we said before, that's a bad thing for the business. So you want to have positive impact, which means you need strong organizational change. You need to be explaining to the different business units, what's coming, why it's valuable. And this is part of that CISO's job, that inside selling officer, right? That's going to be going around and saying, hey, we're putting this in place to protect your department. Let's get everybody on board. And this takes a long time, right, to be able to do this. Because if you ignore some of this stuff and you just buy the product and stick it in and then tick off all the users, that's kind of a path to potential to pretty much potential failure, impacting the business in a negative way. So you have to take the time to kind of get everybody's buy-in and do it the right way. And then again, helping them understand what other processes have to be developed, how this stuff is going to be managed long term. And as we sort of talk about that managed long term, let's kind of hit that button here. And that's kind of where we get to the end of it, right? We're going to integrate this into our security operations. How is this going to affect things? What are we going to look at from a threat hunting perspective? How are we going to be monitoring the data and based on it, how it's classified? And when do we want to make decisions to investigate things further? What's going to be a red flag versus a green flag? These kinds of things, because the whole point of putting this in isn't just to like throw labels and encryption on stuff. It's actually to better manage the security of it. And again, make people's lives easier. If in the data protection example we're talking about here, as an end user, if I don't know any better about one piece of data or the other, we're relying on this technology and this program that's built around it to make sure that those controls are working, right? And so if you ignore this program that needs to be developed around this technology, then you're not necessarily going to be aiding those users, and that's going to, that's going to be less valuable than obviously being able to provide a lot of insight around the value of the program to your clients, right? So you'll see how we've got this here. The other part of this is, I know from a sales standpoint, if you've got a hot lead and they want this product, it's really hard to go back and ask. You don't want to slow the deal down, but at the same time, taking a few extra beats to make sure that this stuff is done first and that they're aware of, hey, you can't just plug this in and walk away. The client's going to be much more in a much better position at the end of the day, having done this and thought about this. And you'll still get the sale, and you'll probably be able to, and the goal here is to be able to grow that total contract value or help your partners see some value. And that's what we'll talk about sort of next here is, you saw the product sale. If they don't understand their risk appetite, the compliance, data privacy, the frameworks, how are they the GRC side of the world, there's engagements that you can do to help them build that out. There's these specific things they have to do around data classification, labeling. These are all, again, separate engagements that you can conduct, or you can build into selling a comprehensive program development, right? You can say, hey, here's all the stuff we're going to do, and walk through and get one big contract if you want, or you can piece and part this out. The actual program development stuff here in the middle, taking the front end, taking the technology, operationalizing it, helping build out the staffing or the services model that may need to exist to run all this, being able to help them with the integration, handling that organizational change, handling that training. Again, this could be something you're doing, this could be something your partners are doing, and then being taken into a state of managed services, right? So a state of managed risk or managed data protection in this case, and handling some of that day to day that, depending on their staffing model, their size, their requirements, all of this stuff here up front, could again be an additional opportunity. So when I think about this from a channel perspective, I mentioned, that it's, having partners. If you can't do all this, and most organizations wouldn't do all of this, but being able to have those channel organizations that you're working with, those partners, this helps drive value, because we all know if you sell product, you don't usually care about the services. And if you sell services, you don't care about the product a lot of times, at the rep level, right? So as an individual selling, the company's going to say, "Oh, we want our clients to have everything and get everything, and do all things the right way." But at the end of the day, that rep's worried about the things they have to do to make their money, right? So this helps educate those reps on why, if you're a services company, selling technology can be valuable. Because if you've got this data protection technology, well, here's all of these services that I can go ahead and sell. And as a technology company, you can be like, well, I just want to sell my kit. That's great. But if you can sell all this other stuff, then they can drive value, which means that your technology is going to be put in place. It's going to have a higher adoption rate. It's going to have a higher rate of success. It's going to be stickier. It's just going to make it better. And then your renewals will be easier. Your ability to expand licensing and, when you do upgrades and things like that are all going to be better. And these are things that I'll probably do another session about this specifically for the channel from a sales enablement standpoint. These are things that when you're working with channel partners who are selling things different than you need to understand, because just saying, "Oh, we want you to sell our stuff," they're not going to necessarily be incented to go do that. But if they can see the dollar signs at the end of the tunnel and being able to see this whole programmatic approach, that's going to help those channel organizations much better. For you, regardless of which part of this or all of it you're doing, being able to bring all this information, this value to your clients is going to show that you understand that their business, that you understand the problems they have to solve. And they may tell you, don't worry about this. We're just going to do this. That's fine. You can only do what you can do, but they're going to remember that you did add that value. They're going to remember that you know more about actually securing the organization, creating programs, and having a holistic view and understanding of things, which is going to make you more likely to get the phone call when they need a question, when they have something that they want to ask somebody, whatnot. So as a rep, this gives you something to talk to your clients about, specifically, branching out from wherever your sort of key services or technology is. As an SDR, this is something that you can kind of have there for when you're getting that back and forth conversation going. You may talk to somebody they may say they have data protection technology, but you can build up some case points about, like, well, how are you dealing with changing classifications, and how are you dealing with, the compliance landscape of your industry, changing all the time. And, or there's a lot of, well, we see a lot of people, a lot of organizations end up deploying data protection technology and then not maintaining it, thus making it shelfware. So how are you managing that? Like, there's a lot of problems that are all inside here that can be addressed or that will be highlighted by being absent. And you can use those as talking points to go back and forth with those organizations and continue to find, one, you're delivering value, you're educating, you're engaging with that client, and all of that drives demand, which is why I say this is also valuable from a marketing standpoint, because taking those key points of that education engagement, the things that are working, the differences that exist, being able to market your solution around pain points and not just technology or services ones and zeros, right? But saying, hey, we know these are the challenges commonly faced. Here's how we help address it. Like, again, that's powerful information for marketing teams as well. And then again, it goes right back into feeding into your sales processes as well. So that is all we have for today. Short and sweet, which is how I would like to keep it. Let me know if you enjoyed this. If you've got questions on the comments, I'll be happy to answer any of those. If there's something here you found interesting and would like to have me expand on, or maybe you've got a Q&A that warrants a longer session, let's do that too. And share it with anybody that you think might find this useful. I really appreciate it. Thanks, guys. Have a great day.